The United States is often known as the melting pot in reference to the many different cultures and ethnicities that call the United States home. Today, more than ever, schools are diverse, filled with students from all different backgrounds. In my research, I have found an answer to the question: can multicultural education and culturally relevant pedagogy be used to increase student interest in social studies? It is important to first understand what multicultural education and culturally relevant pedagogy are. Banks and Banks define multicultural education as a field of study and an emerging discipline whose major aim is to create equal educational opportunities for students from diverse racial, ethnic, social class, and cultural groups. One of its important goals is to help all students to acquire the knowledge, attitudes, and skills needed to function effectively in a pluralistic, democratic society and to interact, negotiate, and communicate with people from different groups in order to create a civic and moral community that works for the common good. Equity pedagogy is defined as teaching strategies in classroom environments that help students from diverse racial, ethnic, and cultural groups attain the knowledge, skills, and attitudes needed to function effectively within and help create and perpetuate a just, humane, and democratic society. As an educator, why is it important to consider different cultures within the classroom? Many of us may have asked ourselves this question a time or two throughout our educational journey. According to an article by Janine Parks, it is important to have a multicultural classroom model because a sound multicultural education model manifests an acceptance of a respect for all cultures in our pluralistic society. It fosters positive self regard in one's own culture and positive attitudes towards the culture of others. While exploring similarities and differences among cultures, it helps develop an understanding and appreciation of one's own cultural heritage as well as that of other cultures. It fosters the ability to function harmoniously and productively in a multicultural society. Aside from research responses to the question of why, we need to put ourselves in the shoes of a student trying to learn outside of their social norms. As a constructivist educator, it is our duty to make the classroom student-centered for each child, not just the ones that are culturally similar to us. To be a builder of knowledge, values, and community in our classrooms, our teaching pedagogy must be one that reflects an understanding of the diverse cultures from which our students may come from. According to Banks and Banks, there are 5 dimensions of conceptualizing multicultural education. These are content integration, the knowledge construction process, prejudice reduction, equity pedagogy, and an empowering school culture and social structure. Our sole purpose as educators should be to connect with all students in a way that allows you to successfully relay content and make real-world connections. How does this all play into increasing interest in social studies, though? Social studies is often a subject that is pushed to the side, covering content in a constricted amount of time, and possibly every other day, sticking strictly to the given curriculum, leaving little room for inquiry learning. According to a study conducted by Susan Gibson from the University of Alberta, the problem with social studies is a result of the mismatch occurring because the teacher is caught in the zone of between, in which he or she is indwelling in two curriculum worlds. One world is the curriculum as planned, and the other is the curriculum as lived in the classroom. Gibson says that teachers need to begin to see themselves as curricular instructional gatekeepers. This title requires teachers to consider the educational purpose of curriculum. This is often an intimidating concept for teachers as focus is primarily placed on math and ELA in schools. Teachers must alter their pedagogy to create a classroom that includes multicultural education. Gibson goes on to say that social studies experiences having a culturally relevant pedagogy provide learning opportunities for students to develop skills of active and responsible citizenship and the capacity to inquire, make reasoned and informed judgments, and arrive at decisions for the public good. Teachers with culturally relevant pedagogy are not only teaching content but also preparing students to become productive members of society. Students should be able to feel a part of a larger purpose within the community of their classrooms. All students should be encouraged to affirm themselves as unique individuals, and they should accept and respect the differences shaping individual identities of other students. Banks wrote that the claim that multicultural education is only for ethnic groups of color and the disenfranchised is one of the most damaging misconceptions with which the movement has had to cope. One misconception teachers need to realize is that acknowledging color or cultural differences is not a negative thing. Diversity should be celebrated, and students should be encouraged to engage in activities that address social justice issues. Teachers need to implement strategies to teach students effective ways to respond to such issues in their school and their community. Banks described the relationship between diversity and social justice as one that provides schools, colleges, and universities with an opportunity to educate students in an environment that reflects the reality of the nation and the world, and to teach students from diverse groups how to get along and how to make decisions and take actions in the public interest. Social justice is something that students should be taught in social studies to encourage the development of productive members of society. According to Janine White, social justice involves exploring the social construction of unequal hierarchies which result in a social group's differential access to power and privilege. White suggests that the best way to address social justices is to embed specific issues into the curriculum. More often than not, teachers try to hurry through topics that make us uncomfortable. This is not the most effective way to approach these subjects or instruct a generation to become socially just members of society. One suggestion discussed in Janine's White article were to extend lessons on genocide and the Holocaust by providing students with an opportunity to reflect and create websites or podcasts demonstrating an understanding of the content. Making connections with students and having students understand value and develop an empathy as they learn about the world around them will help students have a deeper understanding for the needs to study other cultures and study historical information. Ashley G. Lucas says one way to help students develop empathy is to have them connect with a person's story, whether through a fictional work or a work of nonfiction that focuses on one person's experience. We have to get our students to the highest level of blooms by giving opportunities for students to create and internalize information rather than just meeting the standards. Some ways to effectively do this is to integrate literature into social studies. Elementary school students can connect with literature, especially historical fiction, as it can make content more easy to understand. According to Stephanie Wasta, incorporating children's literature in social studies instruction can provide a way to connect students to other places, other children's lives, and the way a place has impacted the lives of daily activities, beliefs, interests, and their interactions with others. Here are some examples of texts that integrate easily into social studies. Barbed Wire Baseball by Marissa Moss is a great book to use when learning about Pearl Harbor. It discusses the Japanese-American internment camps in 1942 and can tie in discussion about secondary sources. Discrimination is often only discussed when talking about civil rights in South Carolina history, but there are other instances in history that people were discriminated against. This book allows students to internalize the effects of Pearl Harbor not only on the United States, but also on Japanese Americans. It is important to teach upcoming members of society about times of discrimination to raise a generation that will hopefully stand against unjust acts. Pink and Say by Patricia Polacco can be integrated into social studies classrooms when learning about the Civil War. This book is a true story of a heroic rescue made by a Union soldier from the 48th Color Regiment. This story also allows readers to develop a sense of how life was during this time and relate to the value of friendship and honor. There are also many ways to integrate different teaching strategies into lessons to form a multicultural classroom. One way to integrate into lessons is to take students on virtual field trips. One example I found on the Scholastic website is to take your students on a virtual field trip to see the pyramids and temples of the Mayans. When you're teaching about the Mayan culture, it's important for students to see where you're talking about. You can also tie in a lesson on Cinco de Mayo and the significance of this day to the culture in Mexico. Virtual field trips are a great way to have students actually visit the place you're talking about. Another way to integrate into lessons is to have students learn through current events and resources such as Time for Kids and Scholastic News. Janine White suggests in her article that incorporating current events into the social studies classroom makes students more aware of the world around them. Students can also develop a deeper understanding of primary and secondary sources. In conclusion, I ask, can multicultural education and culturally relevant pedagogy be used to increase student interest in social studies? The answer is yes. Teachers can develop a pedagogy that is geared towards creating meaning and purpose that is also tied to content and creates an atmosphere that encourages students to participate in inquiry learning to develop as members of society. We have to be the change we want to see in the world and instruct students that will be the change in their generation. Through integration of instructional strategies that help students make connections to curriculum and literature that assist in developing empathy, students' interest will, without a doubt, be increased as their eyes are opened to a world many will never have the chance to see. Teachers, let's look at life with the eyes of a child and celebrate the beauty of the world and guide our students to be productive and brilliant members of our society.